Hi, I'm Natalia Muñoz, the news director of Holyoke Media, and today we have the state senator-elect John Velis from Westfield, representing the Democratic Party. Senator, you flipped a district.
Yeah.
How'd you do it?
So my approach to politics has always been about, when I knock on a door, when I meet somebody for the first time, and I think this is a problem, a systemic problem with our politics at large right now. It's so divisive. There's so much hatred in the process right now. And I was taught at a very, very young age, even just in my basic interactions with other people, my parents kind of taught me, when you talk to someone, try to find what brings you together. Let's not begin this conversation by what separates us. Let's not talk about how you're a Democrat, I'm a Republican, vice versa, how we can't agree on everything. I think the most important word in politics is compromise. And I think, unfortunately, the most forgotten word in politics is compromise. So part of my I was going to say my campaign spiel, if you will, but that's the wrong way to put it. The wrong way to characterize it, because it's truly who I am, is instead of talking about what separates us, let's talk about where we can agree. Let's sit down and have a conversation. Let's get a cup of coffee rather, have a conversation. And as I always tell people, when I go to bed at night, I firmly believe that both a Democrat and a Republican are capable of good ideas. It's not an either or. I mean, this is not gang warfare. I frequently will tell people, as I think you recall, I'm still in the Army, and I've spent some time overseas. In one of them, I go back to my first deployment to Afghanistan back in 2012 to 2013. And I remember part of my job there was to talk to these various kind of warring warlords and these different factions. And what really struck me as really scary on one side, but good at the time because we were getting things done, was that I observed more of a willingness to compromise and work together with those groups who have been fighting for literally hundreds of years that our two main political parties today are. And that's a problem to me, and it's scary to me. And I kind of categorically reject that across the board. So when you talk about flipping a district, one of the things that I came to understand and appreciate is that whether it was Holyoke or Easthampton or Southwick, Westfield, Agawam, and the hill towns and everything in between, on some level, people want their government to start working for them again. Elected officials have never had lower approval ratings, and part of that is because nothing gets done. No one's willing to talk to each other, to compromise. Think about it this way. I always say this when I go into schools in Westfield and talk to the students. In many respects, elected officials are the only profession out there where compromise is not part of the job description. Every other job out there, whether it's, I'll pick on me for a second. Actually, I shouldn't say it was one of my favorite jobs ever. Making pizzas and delivering pizzas. You compromise with your colleagues. I'll take this shift, you take that shift. For some reason, elected officials don't need to do that. I reject that on all levels, and I think that message resonated with a lot of people, irrespective of what their political beliefs were.
Senator, you just won. You trounced your competitor, and yet there's going to be another set of elections on November 3rd. So you're going to have to run again in just a few short months. And if John Cain, the candidate from the Republican Party, has said he's going to run again. In these short months that you have between now that you just got elected and running again, what do you hope to accomplish?
I think I would be disingenuous if I told you that the next 5 or 6 so months, for all intents and purposes, it's going to be responding to the effect that COVID-19 has had on us. Some of the conversations that I'm participating in now as a lawmaker, the financial consequences, the economic consequences of this pandemic, to say they're dire would be an understatement. So really ensuring the 11 cities and towns in this district have a seat at the table to ensure that when it comes to recovery money, stimulus money, schools, because all of these other issues, they're all inextricably tied to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll give you, for instance, I was reading a report this morning, this past November or December, I forget, all my days are a blur now. We passed the Student Opportunity Act. landmark education legislation. And there's talk right now is, will we have the funds because of COVID-19 to fund that? So COVID-19 is the immediate, and ensuring the 11 cities and towns in this district have a seat at the table. Not just a direct response to that, but all of these other issues that kind of emanate from that, ensuring, the Holyoke schools. My mom's been at Donahue School in Holyoke forever. So I've been into her classroom, obviously the Westfield schools. There's a lot of needs, but I think in that short time period, it's going to be the response to what we have going on with COVID-19.
Also, you have been a state rep, so, moving in a manner of speaking across the hall to the Senate chambers, that transition won't be hard. You already know everybody, but you will have to be at the State House more often.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be, I think, you go from being one of 160 to one of 40. At Westfield, very similar to Holyoke, Aaron Vega and myself both represent one city or town because the population of Holyoke, the population of Westfield. Now this balloons to me for add an additional 10 towns, and then even take it a step further. You've got all these different communities with all these different issues facing them, all these different political ideologies, from the most progressive to the most conservative, and then going down to Boston and representing all of them. It's going to be really cool. It's probably not the best word to use, but I'm really looking forward to it. And I welcome the time in Boston. Like we said before we went on air, I raised my hand to run for this seat. I look forward to it and everything the job entails. And I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't say this to you. One thing that I can tell you, everyone, they may agree, they may disagree with my politics, but what I can tell you, and obviously your viewers listening to this, one thing that people will come to understand very soon is that they're not going to have anybody who outworks me. Might not agree on everything, and I think that's part of the process, but I'll always sit down and talk with you. And if we disagree, we'll agree to disagree, and we'll do it in a very kind, cordial way. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. So I'm just really excited, as you can probably tell, to start this new chapter of my life.
And the other thing, as you mentioned about, you need to have people who can collaborate. You need to be able to listen to everybody and speak with everyone and have it be with kindness and respect.
Of course.
You are one of the few people, elected officials, who talks that talk and walks that walk. How do you persuade other people to get on that same page?
I'm in the Army, and we have an expression. We say leaders lead, followers follow, and actions speak louder than words. Being one of 40, representing so many different people, I've got a much larger audience that I can do that with now. One of the things, and I apologize if this is coming off as self-serving, but it also happens to be true. One of the examples I seek to set is just that, the benefits of working together. I mean, there's not an opportunity that I miss. In the past, it's been speaking at Westfield State, and I say, if you take one thing from the remarks that I'm going to give you today, is to collaborate, to compromise. And I tell them, if you're a fan of Fox News, when you go home tonight, I want you to watch CNN or MSNBC. If you watch MSNBC or CNN, watch Fox News. And the interesting thing about that is I've had any number of those former students reach out to me and say how they still do that. So now it's going to be magnified. Now I'm going to do that at Holyoke Community College. Now I'm going to do that at other places. My firm belief, and you didn't ask, but I guess I'll say it anyway, I'll take the chances that we're kind of at a crossroads in America right now, a proverbial fork in the roads. I consider myself somewhat of a student of history. And if you look at the great dynasties and empires and the great, nation states, many of them have one thing in common that led to their demise and their collapse. Many of them, it wasn't a collapse from external factors, it was internal factors. And I believe the political partisanship and the tribalism in our politics today is that serious. And that if we don't start to adopt this mindset, we'll go down as a nation. I am far less impressed with a politician who's going to come out and say, we'll just use two of the big names out there. President Trump is the worst person in the world. I never want to work with him. And then the other side saying Elizabeth Warren is the worst U.S. senator, or Senator Markey is the worst U.S. senator. Well, that's great as a talking point, but in terms of getting something done, what are you accomplishing? What are you getting done? I want to roll up sleeves and be of service to others. Public service can and should be a good thing where we can help a lot of people. And that's my version of politics.
When you approach the Senate president about chairmanships and committees, which ones have you thought about? I know this is early. I mean, I know you just
No, it's a great question. You threw me a little curveball right there. I like it. I like your style. I think so. I'm on Ways and Means right now in the House of Representatives, and there are any number of issues that I am so deeply committed to. Substance use disorders, mental health. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. What Ways and Means you have the ability to do is kind of have an impact of all of them, because you want to know what's going on, follow the money in many respects, and to be able to participate and impact those decisions, what resources go where and where that priority should be. I think that's great. When my first foray into public service, if you will, a lot of people don't know this about me, was on the Westfield Commission for Citizens with Disabilities. So I've got a very, it's something that's personal to me, and to be able to advocate for the little guy or the little girl that can't advocate for themselves. How cool is that when someone might not be able to do something themselves, and to try to step in and be an advocate for them. So there's so many issues that I have an interest in, and then kind of big picture, separate from all this, I think one of the biggest challenges, if you will, is going to be that the people, from Holyoke to the hill towns, everything in between, have a seat at the table. Western Massachusetts, historically, we feel that in many respects we're that kind of ignored part of the state. What I can tell you and your viewers is that I can be loud, I can be aggressive, I can pound the table to represent the district that I have to. So I think that's a big part of it, separate and distinct from the committees, building those relationships with the Senate president, with the Senate leadership, to ensure we're taken care of.
Senator, since you're going to be spending so much more time in Boston, now you have a bigger district, who's going to be your point person representing you here?
Here, meaning in Holyoke?
Yeah, in Holyoke and Western Mass. Who do we call when we need to help on something, and not the media, I mean just the general public?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, because at the end of the day, accessibility is the most important thing. I always tell people, call me directly if you want. And then we're kind of in that logistics phase right now. In fact, right when I get off with you, I've got to return a phone call from the Senate President's Chief of Staff to talk about, the staffing issues, the office things, stuff like that. But make no mistake about it, and I tell this to everybody, and I would encourage people to talk to people in Westfield about this. You're going to know where to find me. There's going to come a day and age in the not too distant future when I tell people that I'm going to do office hours in all 11 cities and towns in this district. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to follow up with it. And people are going to know not being able to contact me and not getting a return call is not going to be an issue with me. It's something that we in my office pride ourselves on. So all that information, once I have it, the phone numbers, the new emails, because it's actually going to be a transition. My email is going to change. My phone number is going to change. So I'll make a deal with you. Once I get all that information, it's coming right to you.
Okay. All right. My last question.
Yeah.
This COVID is going to be with us for an unforeseeable amount of time. How, when you talk about office hours, you may have to do those through Zoom, for instance.
I know. It's a reality that I was joking around with someone the other day. Obviously, throughout this COVID pandemic, Zoom. But when this thing's over, if I never hear that word again, Zoom, I'm going to be just fine with it. But it's been great, and it allows us to communicate. So yeah, anybody, office hours. My hope, my prayer is that in a very short time period, we're going to be able to, on some levels, have some type of meeting. Even if it's, let's say even there's a group, let's say a group in Holyoke wants to meet with me. And under ordinary circumstances, it might be 20 people in that group. But for obvious reasons, I can only meet with 2 of them. Well, we'll meet with 2 of them, and then maybe me in that group will Zoom the rest of the members. I'm all about kind of getting creative and meeting people where they are. Every city and town in this district has their own unique set of challenges and has its own unique set of complexities to it. My job is to meet people where they are and to go to the people where they are to find out what's on their mind. There's nothing worse than an elected official who thinks he knows more than the people that live in that district. So my job in many respects is to go to Holyoke and to walk all of the streets and talk to people and say, what's on your mind? What are the issues facing this part of Holyoke? Because, you know, South Holyoke may be different from this part of Holyoke. And even within the parts of, you know, within parts of the district, there's so many different complex, nuanced issues that separate it. So I'm not one of these folks who are going to go in and say, I know more than you already. You know more in your little fingernail about Holyoke than I do right now. My job is to get that information from you.
And just thinking with getting creative and adapting to things, when this whole pandemic hit us and we had to change our lives entirely, that also included campaigning.
Yeah.
And many of the messages to persuade people to vote had to be adapted or even eliminated in its majority. Now thinking, since you got elected, what has been some changes or additions that you have to do or that just came up to your mind after 48 hours that, you know, as a senator you have now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the biggest thing with me in politics is I've always kind of been one of these retail politics person. I want to knock on your door. I want to walk in your neighborhood. I want to show up at your, you know, your street fair, your festival, whatever you want to call it. And I want to meet people. Politics is a people's business. So when you go back a couple months and we had to suspend the door knocking, the meet and greets, the getting out there, it presented a lot of challenges. So we found ourselves having to do phone calls. I mean, phone calls are great, but I believe that if you want to get a true assessment of somebody and who they are and find out about their character, you got to meet them. You got to look at them in the eye. You got to shake their hand and really be able to look at them and see what makes them tick. That was gone. So I was picking people up, and I hate phone calls with a passion. There's nothing worse than picking up the phone and calling somebody as they're chasing around their son, their daughter, or their grandkid, or they're watching TV and saying, hey, I'm John Velis and I'm running to be your state senator. I hate receiving those calls. Forget about making them. So it just completely changed everything. So getting creative, doing stuff like this, doing stuff like Zoom, social media, getting out into the community. You know, I've always kind of been, you know, for the past couple months, just getting out there, like at the Westfield Senior Center and helping hand out food, the food pantries, helping out food, handing out food. Again, kind of going, you'll hear me say this over and over again, meeting people where they are. And now it's going to be so cool because now I'm going to be able to do that, not just in Westfield, I'm going to be able to do that in the other 10 cities in town. So really, really excited to get out there. And a lot of it's, you know, in many respects, you know, that old saying, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. Well, this time around, by necessity, you kind of have to reinvent the wheel because last time I checked, this is the first COVID-19 pandemic the world's ever had for COVID-19. So getting creative, getting innovative, and just letting people know you care. I think people want to know that their elected officials care, and then kind of going to our previous segment, that they're accessible. You know, there's nothing worse. And I'm in my office right now, and as my staffer will tell you right now, if we get a phone call, if I'm out on the street and someone grabs me and says, hey, John, I called your office a week ago and I didn't get a call back. You know, my office hears about it from me because that's the most important thing. And I always tell people that if someone calls my office and wants to have a conversation, I could just be having a regular day. The people in my office could just be having a regular day. But if someone wants to call their state senator or their state representative, what I am right now, 9 times out of 10, they're probably not having the best day in the world and they need our help. So they're to be treated with that respect and responded to with a timely fashion. And yeah, gotta get creative.